So yesterday, I completed the purchase of my first house in the UK. And in this video, I'm going to describe how to buy a house as a first-time buyer in the UK for 2025. Let's get started. The first step in the house buying process is to get a mortgage in principle. The reason you need a mortgage in principle is to first understand how much can you actually borrow from the bank. If you take a step back, right, a house costs 450 grand. You can more or less buy the house in the most simplest way via two methods, right? You can buy it outright with cash. So the house costs 450 grand. You have 450 cash in the bank. You give the seller that amount straight away. House buying done, right? Or you can buy the house with a mortgage. And a mortgage is more or less a loan from the bank collateralized with the property you're buying. So again, for example, if a house costs 450 grand, you have a 50 grand deposit. What you're going to borrow is 400 grand from the bank. So in order to know how much you can actually borrow from the bank, you need to get a mortgage in principle or just do more or less an affordability calculator. But the reason why I stress for mortgage in principle is a lot of estate agents want you to have a mortgage in principle from a bank first before they actually allow you to view a house. Because in their minds, they don't want to waste your time. And to be honest with you, a lot of times they don't even ask for proof of the mortgage in principle. But to me, it makes sense to have that first. Now, how do you go about getting a mortgage in principle? You can do this by yourself online via any bank's website, or you could use a broker, which obviously will come with a fee. And the reason why I'm saying to use a broker right from the start is because when you're applying for a mortgage, you want to be able to look at various rates across the different banks and compare. Doing this by yourself is very challenging. So right from the jump, when applying for mortgage in principle, just hire a broker. You can find one online or via word of mouth, and I think that will help your case. Now for this example, let's actually see how much you can borrow from the bank, right? So I've assumed there are two people applying for this mortgage. Now let's look at some numbers, right? Applicant 1 earns 50 grand and applicant 2 earns 45 grand. So the total income for the both people applying for the mortgage is 95 grand. I'm going to go to any bank's website. For this example, I'm going to use Santander. And more or less the only information you need to put in is how much you earn and if you have any debt, credit cards, student payments, all of that stuff. You put that in a mortgage calculator and to more or less tell you, based on your income of 95 grand, you're buying your first home, and with a deposit of around 45 grand, the bank will be able to lend you 422 grand. Now 422 plus 45 is 467. So more or less the max house price you can get is 467k. Let's round that down to 450 because I think that's a bit more conservative. So you can get a house worth 450k if you have a total income of 95 grand and a deposit of 10% of 45 grand, which I think is fair. Now, if we look at the Excel, right? Total salary, like I said, 95 grand, max house price, 450 grand. Your deposit is 45 grand, which is more or less 10% of the max house price. And your mortgage is over 25 years and you're going to borrow 405 grand, right? That all looks good because if you compare it, 405 grand versus 422 grand, you're borrowing less than what the bank will actually be able to lend you. All looks good. And in your mind, you start looking for houses that cost around 450 grand. But should you do that? Let's look at the other cost in the house buying process, which is step 2. What other costs in this process will you be paying with cash? Stamp duty, which I don't know why we have it, but it is what it is. That will cost you 7.5 grand for a house that costs 450 grand. And again, to find out, just go to the government website and you can see, you can more or less put in the calculation right there. If the house price is 450 grand, your total stamp duty tax will be 7.5 grand. That's fair enough. Now, legal costs involved in buying a house are usually around 2 grand to 2.5 grand. Now, the bank will charge a fee for you trying to get a mortgage. That's normally around 1 grand. And your mortgage broker will charge around 400 to 500 pounds. And the total cost you actually spend to buy the house on top of your deposit is more or less, let's say 11 grand, right? Now, that 11 grand, you have to pay as cash. You can't finance that, more or less. Some banks will let you finance the fee, but honestly, just pay outright. So that's 11 grand. So actually, if you think about it, that 11 grand, we do 450 minus 11. More or less the house you should be looking at is around the 440, 430 mark, right? Because that 11 grand has to leave your account as cash. So keep that in mind. When you find out how much the max you can borrow, subtract that max from all the other costs involved in the house buying process. Now, the next step is to start house searching, right? Which is the actual fun part. So what I did personally was I went to Zoopla. It's a Zoopla, nothing fancy. I put in my postcode. So I work in Canary Wharf, right? So I put in Canary Wharf, London, and I pressed search. Literally, this is what come up first of all. I didn't really care about being close to the office. So I put plus 30 miles from Canary Wharf. Max house price, obviously I will put here 450, even though I'm looking for something around the 430 mark. Now the next thing for me is to check how many bedrooms do I want as a minimum, right? And for me it's 3 beds, minimum 3 beds. Bathroom, I mean, for 450 grand you might have just one, and literally just put C 100 homes, right? And literally sort this by highest price and more or less see what comes up, right? Now as you start looking, you actually realize that, you know what, I actually don't want an old house. I want my house to be a new build because less work to do initially, even though new builds get a lot of bad rep. So people just want a new build. You push your new builds, only 170 come up. Then you say, you know what, again, I actually want to filter this even more and say my house must have a garden. You click on garden. Again, that will reduce the amount of houses. So there are different filters you can pick on. And something else that's actually quite important is location, right? For me, I didn't really care about location in the sense that I didn't mind if I was in Kent, Stevenage, Hitchin, or Surrey. I was kind of location agnostic. All I cared about was that I could actually get to work in under an hour. That was literally all I cared about. And also access to a good gym. So for me, if buying a house, I'll try and be as location agnostic as possible, right? So once you actually find a couple houses you like, I like the fact that on Zoopla, you can more or less favorite the house and then reach out to the seller directly via the app. And the seller, more times than not, will come back to you to arrange a viewing. Now this is step 4, organizing viewings and actually viewing the house. How do you stay on top of viewing over 50, maybe even 60 houses? I use Notion for this. No plug, but for me, Notion was the best app in this case. And I'll actually just show you how I did it. It was nothing fancy. I and my fiance more or less created a Notion template and just used that. Let me just load that. So as you can see, the max I was willing to do was 86 minutes total commute. And also for me, bedroom wise, I wanted at least 4, but that's, by the way, that was my decision. But more or less create a Notion template just like this. And if you're interested, I'll actually enhance this and make it available and link that in the description. So if you're interested, let me know. Comment down Notion or Notion template, and then I'll make this available for everyone. And I'll give you guys some more tips in terms of how to view houses. So what we did was on Saturday and Sunday, we put in as many viewings as possible, right? There were some weekends, or most weekends, when we viewed houses, I was driving, not exaggerating, at least 300 miles. And it was just because we wanted to view stuff quickly and not waste time, right? We didn't want this house viewing process to span 3 months or 4 months. We wanted this process to span just under 3 weeks, right? And I think in our case, it was, 3 weekends of viewing houses, and we viewed like 8 or 9 every single day, right? Wasn't easy, involved a lot of driving, a lot of coffee, but in my mind, it was really worth it because that way we're actually able to compare objectively. Because if you view the house you like on the 1st of June and you're still viewing houses on the 1st of July, do you really remember what you viewed on the 1st of June? How that house made you feel? How the area really was? Yes, you can take videos, but I think trying to bunch those viewings together makes a load of sense. I also make a difference when it actually comes down to putting in an offer, right? So the next step in this case is to research for a lawyer. When you're viewing houses, obviously don't put an offer in on the first one you view on the first day. Maybe not a good choice. But again, if the house is perfect, it's close to work-ish, has all the stuff you need, why not put an offer? Up to you to decide to wait. But once you start putting in offers or viewing houses, it's best to try and get a lawyer in place. How to decide on what lawyer to use? Literally just check online. That's what I did. Again, don't use a lawyer recommended to you by an estate agent. Maybe not the best. They might have some connections. You want a real independent legal team. So try and research a lawyer. Use word of mouth. Speak to your friends, your mom, your dad. Find out who they used. Are they good? Are they bad? Because again, the lawyer makes a huge difference in the house buying process. In my case, my lawyer was actually very good, right? She was actually on job. But there are a lot of stories about lawyers being really annoying. So find yourself a lawyer. The next step is to make an offer. You've been viewing houses and you finally found the one that you like, right? And again, from this example, the max house price we should be looking at is 440k. Let's assume the house you really like, I want to put an offer in for, is priced at 440k. What should you offer to buy the house? 430, 450, 460, 400? Like, what offer should you put down? And people on TikTok and all over the internet will tell you, no, put above the house price by like 5%. No, put under the house price by like 10%, and then try and work from there. Listen, at the end of the day, if you believe the house is worth 440k, and honestly, you don't believe jack because you have no surveying skills, right? You have no valuation skills. So it's not actually not your opinion. Is you see that the house is listed for that amount, and in your mind, you anchor what you should put down to that amount, right? If you put down the exact house price, and someone comes and views the next day and puts down an extra 30 grand on top of the house price, the house is gone. I kid you not, the house is actually gone. And again, you can then decide to put in above the house price. And someone else is bidding for the house as well. And they put in above, you're above. They will get the house. So honestly, there's no right way to do this. Obviously, don't try and overpay for the house, right? Don't try and put in an extra 50 grand. But you have to consider the following, right? The max you can borrow from the bank. Number two, are you willing to start viewing houses again because you don't want to put in an extra 10 grand to get the house? And number three, fatigue, right? This house viewing process is very tiring. And if you remember, right, technically, the max house price you can borrow, if we go back to it, is the bank will lend us up to 420 grand with a deposit of 45 grand. So really, the max house price we can get is 467. Let's say it's 468. And this house is worth 440. That's a 28k difference. And that's why it's good to incorporate these buffers, right? Now, if we add in an extra 10k above the asking price, more times than not, right? Except your estate agent is an effing animal, you will get the house with if you put in an extra 10 grand above the asking price. More times than not, right? Obviously, there's different caveats. At the end of the day, the estate agent could be technically lying to you because they want to get the best price for the seller and you want to put the lowest price to get the house. So more or less, you guys are at odds. But more times than not, you offer slightly above the asking price, you will get the house. And let's assume in this case, you then offered 450k and you got the house. What's next? Once you put in an offer, that offer is sent by the estate agent to the seller. If the seller accepts it, you'll be issued a document called a memorandum of sales. And once this is issued, the legal process starts. Which is why I said before, it's good to have a rough idea of who you want your lawyer to be already. Because once the legal process starts, it's time to get going, right? Now, what does the legal process entail? More or less, this is done by the lawyers, right? All you have to do is respond to the emails, chase them, and sign the documents they want you to sign. But more or less, there's not much for you to do but chase them and chase and chase and chase. More times than not, your lawyer, the estate agent, and the seller's lawyers are always talking to each other, hopefully. And more times than not, again, an exchange date will be set for some time in the future. And the main sticking point in the legal process is the searches, right? And searches basically mean the lawyer is going to try and find information about the property you're buying and also the surrounding area, because sometimes some red flags might pop up which will make the property not a good buy. But hopefully that all goes well. Searches could take quite a while. I think mine took 2 months. I'm almost sure it did take 2 months. So searches could take a while, and all you can really do is chase your lawyer and ask them for an update every week at least. Now, while searches are going on, the next step is to try and obtain a formal mortgage offer. Go back to your mortgage broker and let them know you've obtained a memorandum of sale, and they will actually apply for your mortgage in full. Because you already have a mortgage in principle, this literally takes like max a week to actually obtain a full mortgage offer. Obviously, your broker will ask for your income statements, bonus slips, address, utility bills, all the normal documentation stuff. But again, there's nothing for you to do but supply the documents requested. And as far as the mortgage process, the bank will try and value the house. If you remember what I said, a mortgage is more or less a loan given to you by the bank and secured against the property you're buying. So the bank needs to make sure that property you're buying is actually the correct value, right? Because they don't want a case where you borrow 400 grand and the house is actually 380 grand. That's a no-go for the bank, right? The bank wants that the amount you're going to borrow is at least equal to the value of the house. So that way they are fully secured. And to do this, the bank will instruct a valuation of your property. Now, when the bank goes to value the house, the worst thing that could happen is a down valuation where the bank is more or less valuing the house lower than the price we've agreed to buy the house for. So in our example, we've agreed to buy the house at 450k. The bank comes and values the house at 430k. That is a 20k difference, right? Which is not ideal. 20k difference. How do you actually amend this 20k difference, right? The first thing you could do is to try and renegotiate with the seller to reduce the house price to 430k. Sometimes they say yes, most times they say no. The seller might then ask you to go and try a different bank to see if a different bank will value the house more. But more times than not, the bank themselves are not going to value the house. The bank are going to send people that know the area very well to value the house. So it could be the same person. So that is not guaranteed. Again, what you could do to meet this difference is to increase your deposit. Obviously, in this case, we're going to deposit 45 grand. You would then have to increase this by 20 grand, which is not ideal. So there are different ways you can overcome this problem. But for the ease of this example, let's assume the bank value the property in line with the price you're going to pay for the house. What's next, right? Let's assume you get a mortgage offer, but your searches are still ongoing. What you can attempt to do at this point is to do a pre-completion snag. And a snag just means you're looking for defects in the house that could make the value of the house go down, right? What you do is go online again, and in fact, I'll show you. It's nothing special. You go online and you find snaggers and hitching. Different snaggers will come out. You want to look at reviews on Google. You get one to go snag the house. Now, sometimes the sellers will not allow you to actually snag the house before. You have to snag it after you complete, which is not the end of the world. I'm trying to simplify this process because this is a YouTube video, but there's more to think about. But this video is already like long, so let's just get straight to the point. Let's assume you can't snag before you complete. You can only snag afterwards. And let's also assume your searches have come back and it's all fine, right? The next step is exchange of contracts. And this is different from actual completion day, right? On exchange of contracts day, this is the point where you're legally bound to buy the house. And this is the day where you send the deposit to your lawyer. And this is the day where I cry because a lot of money left my account. So you send your deposit to your lawyer. To do this, go into your branch. Don't do it via your online bank because more times than not, there's a limit of 25 grand that you can send in a given day. So go to your branch, tell them you want to send money to your lawyer. They will get that transfer done for you. Money will arrive to your lawyer in like 2 to 3 hours. Email them to confirm receipt. Then your lawyers will more or less take care of the rest and then fix a completion day. Now, completion day could be the same day, rarely, or it could be 2 days later, or it could be more times than not the next Friday. Why they do it like that, I have no idea. And on completion day, this is when the sellers themselves will receive the remaining money from your bank and they can go and get your keys. And that marks the end of the process. Hopefully, it was kind of clear. It was a lot to say at once. I actually recognize that now. So maybe I'll break this down into more videos later. But for now, hope you enjoyed the video. Like the video, and I'll see you in the next one.